focus and attention is like your greatest skill and your greatest asset. And you need to like hone that and train that consciously. Welcome to the Real Estate Investing School podcast. I'm your host, Joe Jensen. Our guest today, he doesn't really need an introduction. It's our boy, Brody Fawcett. How you doing, man?
Good, dude. You need to sound a little bit more excited to do
It's
this today.
Brody Fawcett.
There you go. We need like those buttons you press and then like you get the applaud and everything going on. I think we have those somewhere. Yeah.
We need to get
not excited for me. I mean, excited to talk real estate.
Dude, I'm excited to. These are always fun. I don't know. It's been a minute since we've done one of these, but it's always fun to get back on and just kind of jam on what you're doing, what projects you're doing, just kind of state of the market and everything going on. So I'm excited.
Yeah, same with you, dude. I'm excited to jam with you and just pull, some tips from you and just some strategy and some really like even lifestyle stuff I want to jam a little bit on today. And I think that a lot of the listeners are going to get a ton of value out of a lot of things we're going to talk about. So excited just to jam in general. And I think so many times we get different guests on where it just goes into their story and there's so much to learn from that. But I think every once in a while too, it's good to just have a candid conversation about real estate, the stuff we're working on, what the market looks like, just kind of where things are at in general. So excited to do that with you, man.
Love it. Love it. Well, let's just start out with then what is kind of your thoughts on the market right now? Obviously there's a lot of different directions you could go with that, but people always have all these different opinions. You see stuff on social media. And I mean, what's kind of your take on it in general?
Yeah, such a big, broad, important question, right? I think first thing that comes to mind is we put way too much weight on the market as investors. Now that might sound counterintuitive just in general, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, you have to understand the market and it's so important with investing. And it is to a certain degree. But like letting that hold you back from investing and from moving forward is going to hurt you way more than it is understanding the market perfectly and waiting till you understand it to get into the game or to make a decision in real estate. So what I mean by that, yeah. Why do you love that?
well, just because probably what you're going to expound on, just like say so many times, it's almost more about understanding how markets work than worrying about what the market's doing now. It's like, okay, so interest rates are where they're at. Like interest rates are always an interesting one for me because I'm always like, I don't really care. It doesn't affect how I do my business where the interest rates are at. If I run the numbers and it cash flows and it's going to be a self-sustaining debt that fully covers its debt, like I'm good to go. Now, is that going to be harder to find with interest rates higher? Yeah, but it doesn't change anything about how I run the numbers or how I find things. Like it doesn't change anything about how I do my business. And for long hold stuff, obviously that's different. If you're flipping and doing land development, those people, the market's a bigger of a factor and a lot scarier to deal with. But for the stuff that we do, it's like, who really cares? You know what I mean? It's like,
100%, dude. Yeah. I'm going to go on a limb with this analogy, but let's say to like equal 100, right? Let's say like the number 100 is like the perfect real estate deal, right? Not even saying perfect real estate deal, but it's a win inside real estate. How many different ways can you get to the number 100 mathematically?
I mean, thousands, I'm sure.
Yeah, you got like 1 + 1 + 1 + right? All the way to 100.
99 + 1, 98 + 2. Like there's a lot of ways to get to 100. Right.
Yeah, I think to your point, what happens is when people start focusing so much and letting the interest rate dictate what happens, it's almost like looking at it as the interest rate is equal to 100. And if it's a bad interest rate and it's all of a sudden it doesn't equal 100 and equals 101, I can invest, right? Or if it equals 99, like I can invest, as opposed to understanding that those numbers are just variables and they can change. Like the interest rate can be the number 2, right? And the creativity on a deal can be times 50 and it can be that 50 number, right? Or the way you finance a deal, that can be that can outweigh this interest rate number. And so maybe that's a
I
terrible
like that
analogy, but I think,
analogy. No, I think that's a good analogy because it does. It's like we just put too much weight on certain aspects of the pieces of the puzzle, and it's like, okay, so
mhm.
that part's not as a strength right now. So where's the other strength? You can still get to 100. I love
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yeah. 100%, dude. So that's kind of my thoughts on the market in general. Like, rarely do we see things where everything all of a sudden changes, right? Where like interest rate changes, house prices change. What else is in there? All of a sudden, the way that loans are done changes. The economy's completely changed. Jobs are lost, right? Like all that doesn't happen. A lot of it's inversely related, if that's the word that you kind of use, where like if the interest rates are changing or are going up, what's happening? Like prices are usually going down, right? So like there's other pieces of the puzzle that are shifting and changing and things like that. Same thing goes with like when things are more competitive or interest rates are higher or house prices are higher, like there tends to be not as much competition, right? Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of it, is it's driving the competition, right? So when that happens, there's more opportunity because there's less competition. And so just understanding like the market, when the market changes, it's not a good market or a bad market. It's simply understanding like there's good aspects and bad aspects when that happens, just to your point of understanding how the market works, not what the market is. And then based on
Mm-hmm.
understanding how the market works, you can take advantages of these different opportunities of, cool, this is an opportunity where the market's weak right now, as opposed to like, oh, this is a bad time to invest because the market's strong in this area.
Yeah, I have a perfect example on that. Everybody's like, oh, they're waiting. They wish they had lower interest rates. They wish they had lower interest. I'm like, guys, do you remember when the interest rates were low and every deal had 55 offers on it and the sellers were requiring hard earnest money and no due diligence period? Like, that was a rough time in a lot of ways. And I just had an offer today. Actually, the guy called me back, the agent. He's like, hey, they're not going to take your offer unless it's hard earnest money. And I was like, kick rocks, dude. Like, it's not 2021 right now. Like, I'm not getting hard earnest money in today's market. I don't
Mm.
have to. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like there's pros and cons either way. And as far as the market goes, just kind of then we can pivot. But I think a lot of it is like there's a difference between speculative and investing. Like, investing isn't really speculative in my opinion. And if the decisions you're making are really heavily weighed by the market, you're speculating. You're not investing. Because if you're truly investing, the market will do what it's going to do and you're going to win either way. But
Mm-hmm.
if your winning is dependent on what the market's doing, that's very speculative because you don't have any control over that. Um,
100%.
so anyway,
Yeah, who
but
who wants to have a strategy that's based on pure luck and chance, because you
yeah,
can't time it
exactly.
ever. I,
Yep.
I think too, the last kind of point I would make to all of this is, whose advice are you taking? Majority
Mm,
of the people in the world do not invest in real estate. And even if they do a little bit, it's not something that they're fully understand, right? It might just be something on the side and they're like, they dabble in it a little bit. So this idea of, we're hearing all these things about the market and this is happening, well, yeah, maybe it's how it affects real estate agents, maybe it's how it affects lenders, maybe it's how it affects, home builders, whatever. That's usually the narrative that you get, right? In general, the stuff you hear on the news or this, that. Maybe it affects flippers, right? Like, but just understanding that just because that's a narrative you hear, that doesn't mean that applies to you as an investor, especially as a cash flow or a passive income investor, because
yeah,
a lot of times, as you know, Joe, we'll overpay for a house. Like we'll pay
sure.
more money than it's even worth. And most of the world says that's a not smart decision. You shouldn't do that, right? Why would you do that? It's dropping, it's declining in value, whatever. But we understand that it's cash flowing extremely well. We got it with a low down payment. Our cash on cash return is through the roof.
Hmm.
And eventually it's going to go back up and there's going to be appreciation that's cherry on top, right? So just be careful at what narrative you are actually listening to and whose advice you're actually taking.
I love that. I love that, man. So what else is on your mind?
Dude, I want to I want to jam on some stuff with you. Um, we've been working a little bit closer together lately, just within like the mastermind group and some lifestyle stuff and some branding stuff and some real estate stuff and
Yeah.
passive income and retiring early and all that stuff. So I have a list of questions I want to go through with you. But before we dive into that, I mean, is there anything that you wanted to jam on specifically?
No, not really. I want to hear about some of the projects you have going on, but we can get to that in a minute. I know you're working on this new like glamping site. I was seeing some images on that, and I just think that's kind of cool. It's almost becoming your niche, which is interesting. I love how people you just it can almost like rebrand themselves like, oh, at this point this is your niche, like student housing, and then it's like, oh, not like tiny home resorts, and then like, what's he gonna do next, like what's his next like kind of niche thing gonna be that he like gets into. But it's cool to just kind of see where it's all running right now.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. No, it'd be fun to jam on for sure. And I think for me, because I think it's easy to look at all these different strategies in real estate or even look at what I've done and it's like, oh, he's all over the place or all across the board. And shouldn't you just focus, right? And I think that it might look like that from the outside, but like my overall principles of investing haven't changed. My overall
Mm-hmm.
mission hasn't changed, right? The mission's always been to, hey, how do I get the highest cash on cash return and produce the most amount of cash flow to ultimately live my dream life and to have my passive income fund the lifestyle that I want to live that allows me to do the things that fulfill me and to give back and all these different things that fire me up, right? And so
Yeah.
there's different ways to get there within real estate. And so that's kind of what's fun and that's what I feel like, makes us, cuz you've done a lot of different stuff too, qualified to teach people the different ways because not every single strategy is going to be the best for a certain person. And I think that's one of the downsides of like media today is you get one strategy that's like jammed down your throat, right?
Yeah.
And it might be flipping, it might be wholesaling, it might be sub two, where it's like you have to do this. This is the only way to do that. And that's the first thing. Like anytime someone tells you this is the only way to do something or you have to do it this way, that's like should be red flags all over the place because it it's
100%.
it probably works, right? It does work, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And so I think understanding, hey, where am I at? Where do I want to go? And then what's the best next strategy that's going to get me to where I want to be, where I want to end up. And so, yeah, it's just important to understand those aspects of it and then hone in on that one from
Well, it's
there.
so custom. I was recently asked, like, oh, what's the secret sauce of like a successful student? Because I coach a few of the students. It's like, what's like the secret that like works for everybody? And I'm like, there isn't one. Like, that's the whole point. Is these are one-on-one things because it is different for everybody,
Mm,
and it's not even different just for every student or every investor. It's different for every investor every couple years. Like what
yeah.
you were doing and what made the most sense for you 5 years ago is different than what makes the most sense for you today. I think of that quote where they're like, have a dream big enough to fit everyone else's dreams underneath it. And I think that's kind of the projects you're doing now. I'm like, these are these cool big, kind of resort projects make so much sense because you do a lot of partnership stuff. You bring in investors. And if you're just doing these little one-off duplexes, like there's not really room for someone else to come in and make a grip also. But if you do a whole resort, yeah, it's going to cost a couple $1 million more, but now the dream is big enough to bring in more people, and so it plays into your actual strategy for that project. And it's just cool to
Yeah.
see how it works. And again, in 5 or 10 years from now, you'll be doing something else that makes more sense for your strengths at that time, and that's how it should be.
Totally, dude. Yeah, yeah, I hope so. It's kind of like the thought of like I think we hold on so much to these certain beliefs that we have in general about life and principles and especially real estate. And it's almost like this pride factor, 5, 10 years go by and it's like, yeah, I still believe this and I still think this. I said this
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago. I'll say this today. And it's like, is that actually a good thing? I think a lot of times we need to look at it the other way around. Like it's a good thing to change your mind. It means you're growing, right? It's a good thing to have a different opinion on something in a certain aspect because it means you're open to changing and developing, and you don't know everything, right? And so I want it to be like that as I continue to get older and more experienced as well. But I also like, I know you're big on, I want to get into like your purposes of life. Cause I know you have like
Yeah.
three main things, but one of them I'm going to like leak it right now is experiences. And that's kind of
Yeah.
the same thing for me. That's part of my mission statement is like creating experiences for people that they wouldn't normally have. And those experiences tend to like shift their mindset. And I want to be the person that, you know, at the end of the year, you ask, I don't know, my family or friends or random people, it's like, hey, what was the highlight of your year? Looking back on the last 12 months, what was the highlight? And they say something that like, oh yeah, when Brody took us to his tiny home resort, or yeah, when he put on this, you know, couples goal setting workshop, it shifted our paradigm to do this, this, and this, whatever, right? That
Yeah.
to me is like fun and exciting because you can have this ripple effect in other people's lives because then they change and they dream bigger faster and they help other people do that as well. But like going back to all of that, like for me in real estate, it's the same exact thing. I remember this was the third property that I ever bought, and it was a condo, and it was like a stepping stone to having a cabin. And for me, like
Hmm.
it was such a fun investment because it didn't cost me a lot of money to get into it. It was an Airbnb. I made good money on it. But then like as like a young kid, if I had friends getting married, I could like write them a card and be like, "Hey, here's a discount code as your wedding gift, you know, go stay a weekend here on me." Or like just being able to
Yeah.
offer that to family or to friends or like randomly. I don't know, something like simple about that, it just like fired me up. And so it's just interesting looking back at that and how that's kind of like compounded into, you know, these different resorts and having handfuls of units to where it's like we're getting together with like my whole family, you know, and having like more of a family reunion there now. And this this new resort, like the way we're designing it is super fun and super exciting. But like with a few of my partners that are entrepreneurs, they're into like mindset and just different personal development stuff. And so we want to, as well as like fitness and wellness. And so a lot of the things like we have like a sauna facility we're doing, like cold plunge kind of as part of that. And then we have an outdoor gym that we're putting in. And just the vibe
Mm.
of it is to where we can host different like
Retreats
entrepreneurial
and stuff.
retreats and wellness retreats and just kind of creating that experience and vibe, but you're combining it in a way where you get to utilize real estate, you get to utilize creating experiences, you get to utilize working with your friends and that creativity side of your brain. And then like the cash flow is insane to top it all off. And you're doing that with a high cash on cash return. Like to me, that's like a win and it checks all those boxes and it's a win for other people. And so that's when real estate gets super fun and super exciting. And so obviously I'm passionate about how all those align.
Yeah, that is exciting, dude. Like it's cool to see you piecing it together and like I said, and then yeah, depending on who you're working with, that affects the vision and it pivots and it adjusts and it'll cool to see the final product.
Yeah, man. Well, I recently listened to a podcast that you were on. That was kind of fun because it wasn't all about real estate, but
Yeah.
going back to like your purposes of life, like you said, three things. I wanted you to share those if you remember what
Yeah,
they are.
no, I definitely do. Yeah, no, this is
Okay.
pretty deep. So I have this whole concept I've been putting together called the love and life framework. And if anybody wants a copy, they can
Love
just
and life or love
loving,
in
just
life?
like love and life, like loving life, but without
Okay,
the
love
G.
and
I'm
life.
like
Okay,
from
I got
heaven
it.
and cool. Love and life.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, if anybody wants a copy of it, they can just go to my link tree. It's just my josephfjensen.com. You go to that website and you can just find it there and I can send you one. But in it, it talks about the three pieces of purpose. And I think this is like really everything. The purpose of life boils down to these three pieces is experience, serve, and create. And the cool thing is at different times in your life, just like we were talking about, you're going to pivot your real estate strategy differently depending on different times in your life. You're going to pivot how much you focus on those different parts of the three pieces of purpose depending on your purpose and or your period of life. You know, one time you'll focus more on service, another time you'll focus more on experiences, another time you'll focus more on creating. And it was interesting when you were talking about, you know, what you like to do with real estate and these retreats. I'm like, dude, you're literally doing all three in one. And that's why it sets you on fire so much because you get to have the experience along with everybody. Like it's an awesome experience when you put these things together. But then you're also serving people. You're like, oh, it's so cool to be like, I want people to be like, I had this thing with Brody, you know, and it's like you're just serving people by providing these opportunities and experiences. Um, and you're creating something. You're literally creating resorts, you know, you're literally creating opportunities. You know, you're doing so much creation. You're building a brand and a company and a business and memories. And you're like, you're creating so much. And so it's like, you're doing all three in one, which is probably why it's so exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, dude. Yeah, it's kind of like having a why versus having a bag of whys. I know like Iron
Mm-hmm.
Cowboy talks a lot about that. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, what was your why to get you through all this? He's like, I didn't have one why. I had a bag of whys because the more reasons you have to do something, the more draw, you know, or the more power you're gonna have behind actually doing it. So I
But I
love
think I
that.
think a lot about parenting is a big season of service. You know what I mean? Like you're
Mhm.
serving your kids. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's I before when I was first having my very first kid, I thought about how like this is like the ultimate service project. I used to go on these like international trips every year and like you go in and you like serve some people, you like build a house or I don't know, help them out in different ways. And I'd done a couple different types and it was like, oh, it's so cool, but it's so short. You're there for a week or two and then you disappear. I'm like, dude, raising kids is like the ultimate search project where you get to go as deep
Mm,
as humanly possible in helping someone
yeah.
have an amazing life.
I
And
love
and so
that.
that's a service period, and so some people, you're 21 and you're single and you have no kids, like that might be more of an experience
Mm,
focus. And that's your purpose of life right then, is to go experience and grow. And then you have kids and it's more service oriented. And then,
mhm.
you're getting a little older and you have some resources and you want to create something like a legacy and that's something more long lasting, create a business or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
don't be distracted. I think this is a big principle and with real estate, but with everything is, don't be distracted on what step someone else is on or what phase someone else is on, or even what phase you want to be on, but you're not there yet. If you're right here, just focus on that. Don't feel like, oh, I need to be serving more. If you're on the
Mm,
experience phase, that's okay. Lean into what is setting you on fire, and there'll be a
yeah.
time to do the next. If you're building your cash flow, lean into that, build your cash flow portfolio, and then you can go do the passion projects that maybe won't make as much money, but they'll have an awesome exit down the road and a waterfall ending. It's like, well, don't worry about that right now. Like focus on where you're at and lean into it, and then the next phase will come, and you'll know when you're ready.
Yeah. I love that, dude. I love that just because understanding that concept in general, it allows you to go into experiences or life with a different outlook, which I think allows you to be a lot more patient, or even just your example of looking at having kids and raising kids and looking at as a, hey, this is a service era of my life. Like going to
Mm-hmm.
with that attitude or that mentality or understanding changes everything, because you don't have all these expectations of like, this is the way it's supposed to be, or I'm trying to do this, or I'm trying to get this done, or you don't have a different agenda, but instead you're able to embrace like, hey, this is this time of my life where it's my time to give and to serve. And yes, it's exciting and rewarding in so many like deep ways. But I think if you're mentally in a different era when you're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be in this service era, it
It's
ruins
hard.
everything. It
It
ruins
does.
it, dude.
And you can have all of it. It just it gives you the priority though. Like I just had this instance, so there was some concert or something I want to go to, and it was at the same time as my 5-year-old has this little wrestling clinic. It's like his first wrestling competition, and it's like it's going to be a joke. Like they have no idea how to wrestle. He's 5. He's been doing it for 2 weeks. Like the thing's going to be a joke. But in my priority list, like my kids, serving my kids is just that's the number one priority. And so if I'm not with my kids, yeah, I'll go to a concert, I'll go do this, I'll have a cool experience, or go create something. But when there's a conflict, I don't have to emotionally like, oh, what should I do? It's like, oh, well, the decision's easy because this is the period I'm in, this is the focus of where I'm at, I'm leaning heavier into that aspect. So there's no stress in making that decision. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna be at his silly little
Yeah.
wrestling clinic, because that's
Yeah.
the priority right now.
Yeah.
Everything else is second place. And when you lean into that, yeah, it creates a lot of peace when there's a lot of cognitive dissonance and conflict if you're like constantly trying
Mm.
to battle which one's your priority.
Yeah. Yeah. A good example of that is just not separating like work and play and family and right. Like if it all is just this blurred together thing and you don't understand, like one year my mantra was flip the switch because I just wanted to get so good at going from like, okay, work's done, like flip. Like now it's
Mm,
service mode, right? Or like now I'm a dad and I need to be all in on this, or else like same thing when I'm working, right? Like if
yep.
I start blurring the line too much, it causes problems in different things. And if you don't do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, you don't get to do what you want to do when you want to do it.
Well, and
But
it goes so deep with same with real estate, right? It's like if you're so focused, if you have a choice between this really cool project and a deal that's going to cash flow a ton, and you're still in your cash flow phase of building your cash flow to live off of, it's like, oh, I know what my priority is. If an awesome deal comes along and I can tackle it, cool. But my priority is boom to build my cash flow or whatever. If you're a flipper and your priority is to flip, you're not going to get distracted when it comes to the choice between the two. And so the principle carries over with investing big time. And you got to know what your priority goal is. Even if you have multiple goals, what's your priority goal? And like you were saying, even down to the day, it's like, oh, I know how you do this a lot where he's like, today is like business building day and you focus on the business. This day is real estate day. This day is
yeah,
my day and I get to chill, and you kind of break out your days. And so you can just focus on where you're at and you know what your priority is in that hour or that day. It just makes life so much simpler.
100%, dude. Yeah. And I sent, I don't know if you saw that text, but I sent a book recommendation to our mastermind group text this morning.
Yeah.
But
James Clear, right? I love his
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, and everyone knows him for Atomic Habits, but this book's called Master Your Focus. But anyhow, a lot on those same principles, and that's what I found is you start jumping from task to task to task too often, or you're in defense mode. Someone messages you, you respond right away, like you're constantly in reaction mode, and it doesn't allow you to get into this flow state and accomplish stuff. But that's kind of why I started separating out my days, and even like if you look at my calendar, it's full at the beginning of every week, just because it's all time blocked out with certain things. And so when something does come up or a task does come up and it needs to get done, the first thing is like, okay, cool. Can this go to this day during this time block time? And can I just move it over there? And then I can focus on all of those things that have to do with that same business or that same project all at once instead of trying to solve it right now. And then I don't get anything done that's time blocked for this period. So that book is really good with just like, hey, saying no to certain things and just different hacks on how to do things that allow you to stay focused.
Yeah, I love that. Like focus is so good. There's this quote. I gotta see if I can pull this up here. That I gotta share because it just plays so well into this. It says, oh maybe I didn't find it, but it just talked about how it's like your attention, like treat your attention and your focus like you're a professional athlete and that's your sport. Like
Mm,
that's how important your attention is. And that's the world we live in. Like everything's trying to steal your attention, right? Every
hmm
influencer, everything's just trying to take your attention. If you
hmm
realize like focus and attention is like your greatest skill and your greatest asset. And you need to like hone that and train that consciously, just like you
Yeah.
would if you were a professional athlete trying to be whatever that focus is. Like that
Yeah.
I don't know, like that really hit me. I was like, man, how often do we think about training and
Yeah.
strengthening our focus that important? But yeah, your attention is
Mm.
everything in today's crazy world.
Reminds me of two other quotes too. One of them was actually from that book, but he just talks about like your time and guarding your time, and just from
Mhm.
the standpoint of if somebody you say that time is more valuable than money, but you're not just giving out money to anybody who comes up and asks you for it. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, like that's true.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then the other quote that I like is diluted focus yields diluted results. And I think that one's a big one. And then the other book on focus that I love is Free to Focus. I think that's Michael Hyatt. I love, love, love that book. Free to Focus. That's another good one. But kind of transitioning before we do, I just want to share a story that you probably
Yeah.
remember Casey Baugh talking about it. We were all in his living room a couple months ago, and you remember the story that he told about his dad and asking him if he wanted to go on his private jet to the basketball game.
Mm-hmm. I
I
do.
think this relates so well to just like this topic that we're on right now of like, hey, this is a season of life, or this is your next thing, and staying focused on that next thing and not getting too distracted with these other things. And anyhow, he just like shared the story like the other day how like now he's got all the stuff, right? He's a worth 100+ million. Like he has a jet or two, I don't even know now, but like he hits up his dad, hey dad, I'm going to this, business meeting. I don't even remember what it was at, but he's like, there's a game going on. His dad's a huge college sports fan and love this team. And he's like, I'll pick you up on the jet. We'll go there. We'll hit the game together, and then we'll cruise back in a couple hours. And anyhow, his dad's just like, I can't. He's like, I'd love to. I can't, and his body is just getting too old, and just what it was going to
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the toll it was going to take on him to be able to go and do that. Um, he just couldn't go, as bad as he wanted to. And it made me think, in case he was talking about how he was so grateful for all the other experiences and the sporting events that he took his dad to and flew his dad out to, like throughout his life. And it just made me think, time is the one thing that we're not promised. We don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
of. Money, you can get enough of that, but like time, there's nothing like in that situation that he can do. He has the jet, he has all the money, he has everything he needs, but there's no way he can go and solve that problem, so to speak. Maybe if it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so I think the moral of the story, it's not necessarily like, hey, just go grind earlier and grind harder, even though maybe that's part of that. But I think a couple of things, it challenges you to think like, hey, can you go accomplish what you want to go accomplish a lot faster than you're on pace to do that? And that might cause you to think differently or solve these bigger problems sooner. But is that something you're capable of? And I think the other thing is just to your point, like if we get too distracted and going too many different directions as opposed to doing what needs to get done when it needs to get done, because we know that that's the next thing that's going to get us on this path, then that's something we really need to stay focused on, because if not, it's going to affect us long term in other ways that we might not be able to understand right now. And then I think just number three is understanding like what your priorities are and what's most important, and not sacrificing too much outside of that. Just to Casey's point, it gets to this stage where if you didn't take advantage of those opportunities you had maybe with family earlier on, or opportunities to serve others, or opportunities to go make an impact and inspire people, or whatever like lights you up, if you're passing on too many of those things that are most important, they might not be most urgent, but they're most important, and you let those most urgent things take that place, then eventually I think it leads to a lot of regret later on.
Yeah, man, it's funny, it carries over to so many aspects of life. I think with real estate, obviously that's what we talk real estate, right? It's like action is so important. Like what's everybody's biggest regret with real estate? Like what's the most expensive mistake you've made or your biggest regret with real estate? Everybody's answer is always, I wish I had bought more sooner, right? It's like, I wish I'd just done more. And it's like, we come up with all these excuses of why not to go on that trip, why not to go see that family member, why not to buy that next deal, why not, and it's like, dude, even if you just did it, even if it wasn't perfect, like maybe you don't have a jet to fly your dad across the country like some people, like who cares? Like go talk to him for
Mm-hmm.
5 hours Saturday evening until it's bedtime, and just like that's probably all he cares about anyway. You know what I mean?
Or
It's like
five
just
minutes, or
or
5 minutes
five
a
minutes on the
day,
phone.
or five
Yeah,
minutes
just
a week. Like that might, well, I think that was so cool about this, his story, is because I think we can almost trick ourselves into thinking, hey, once I have the jet, like then I'll be able to go do all this and I'll be able to make up this lost time, or like this is why I'm doing it, this is why I'm grinding, this is why. And then you realize like, no, it was all those moments earlier on that actually made the biggest impact, because you can't even take advantage
mhm.
of this situation that you're in now if you don't take advantage of the situation you're in currently.
Yeah, and it's true with our parents, it's true with our kids, and it's true with our portfolios. I mean, it really is. It's like, man, some of the best deals I got were just these mediocre whatevers that I just did. And then 10 years later,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wow, I can't go back and buy 20 of those. I wish I could, but I was
Yeah.
really glad I did what I did do. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
more action is
Yep.
almost always going to be better than less in basically every aspect of life.
Yeah. 100%, bro. All about that. Kale, I got some questions for you. I
Shoot.
love the lifestyle stuff. Last kind of lifestyle one, and then we'll pivot into more like real estate specific. In a lot of ways, dude, I envy this, like, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know the good word for it, but you have this almost like carefree attitude about everything. And that's a compliment.
Yeah,
Just as
no, I
far
take
as
it as one.
like spontaneous adventure spirit, right? About
Yeah.
you, where it's like, dude, let's go. Like you're just down to go have fun in the moment and create these memories. Whereas for me, sometimes I struggle with that, right? Like
Mm.
I struggle like surfing as much. That's actually like one of my goals is to surf more, right? Because it sounds so silly because I actually love to do it and it's actually really fun for me. But if I don't make time to do it, there's all these other things where I'm like, I'd rather like get this done this week and then I can have all day to surf Saturday or whatever, right?
Yeah.
When reality is like I could go surf every morning for an hour or 2 hours. It won't affect anything, right? So, how do you get that, and like why do you gravitate towards this stuff? I know you just barely did a spontaneous 50, was it 50 miles or 50K foot
50K,
race?
it was like 31 miles or something like that.
Cool. So I know that was
30
spontaneous, right? You
miles.
weren't planning on doing it. It was like fairly last
Literally
minute.
the next day. Yeah, I was just at my buddy's place. Seth, he used to be in the school. That's how I met him actually, which is dope because he's like one of my best friends now.
Yeah, I
Um,
love
but
Seth.
uh, but we're just like, yeah, I was just at his kid's birthday party, and I'm like, what are you guys doing tomorrow? Should we get the kids together? And he's like, oh, I'm doing this 30-mile trail run race thing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I should come like pace you for a couple miles. And then like the more we talk about it, I'm like, well, maybe I'll do like 15 miles. And then like literally the morning of, so I wake up, the race was starting at like 6:30, and I was just gonna go run a few miles with him at the end. But the morning of, I wake up and I woke up like 5, and I was like, well, the race doesn't even start for another hour and a half. I have time to get ready. And so I just
Oh, that's
got my stuff
amazing.
together and went out that morning and met them at the start line. They're like, oh, you're here right now? I'm like, yeah, I'll just see how much I can do. And anyway, I ended up doing the
You
whole 30
decided that
miles with
morning.
them. It was literally until mile 16 that I was like, yeah, I guess I'm gonna do the whole thing. And I ended up doing
Oh,
all of
that's
it. So
funny.
like
You
it was
decided mid
definitely an
race.
impromptu thing. It was fun.
Oh, that's
But
awesome, dude. I ran probably too many marathons like that where the night before someone's like, hey, I have an extra ticket. So and so
like
dropped out and it shows up under their name. And I think sometimes it's even been women and hopefully didn't mess up like the bracket too much.
they're like,
But
you
uh,
killed it. That's
you
funny.
just don't show up for the award ceremony. But
That's
no, I love that
funny.
about you, dude. I love that. I remember one time too, we were staying at this kind of like glamping resort, and it's like, "Where's Joe?" And I like look up on top of this mountain. You have your like yoga mat like out. There's like the sun's going down, and it's like this perfect sunset like on you. The sun's just shining. Everywhere else is shaded, and you're like doing some yoga stretch thing, right? So, I think that's super rad, dude. Just being like present in that type of a way. Why do you gravitate towards that stuff? Do you have any insight on that, or is that just you and that's who you are?
No, I don't know. I mean, so a couple of things I would think about. One, a lot of it does involve like nature and the outdoors. And I think there is something inherently like healing. I don't know, maybe that's a cheesy word to say, but inherently powerful, inherently healing of being in nature. And some people maybe they didn't grow up around nature; they're more uncomfortable with that because of the bugs or the temperatures or this that, and so it kind of holds them back from that. But I truly believe that anybody like spends more time in nature, like they will see a huge benefit. And so a lot of the things I do, it's intermingled with that. So it's in nature, but then when you get to add a physical element to things, it just like brings you more present and changes the whole dynamic. I remember hearing about this thing where it's like if you're using your body, you'll learn better. Like so I
Mm.
listen to like podcasts and books when I run, and I will like take those in and understand those concepts so much better than if I'm just like sitting there or even listening in my car. I listen to my car a lot too, but it just doesn't hit the same as when you are physically active. Like the things come clear to your mind. And so like I think I have my like best inspirations when I'm doing these things, and you get to push yourself. So it's just this awesome combination of pushing your body, pushing your mind, and being in like a state of nature where you can like feel that peace and healing and growth and
Hmm.
fighting. And it's just like a culmination of all these things. So
Yeah, I
I
love
don't
that,
know.
dude.
So, but it
Yeah, I
wasn't
love
always
that.
like that. I mean, just one last piece on that is just, you hear this concept of like, think of the person you want to be and then be like, well, what would that person be doing? Think of the perfect investor. What kind of habits would he have? And I just think like, what kind of person would I want to be? I'm like, well, I want to be the person that does cool stuff. And I remember when I was young and I hadn't really done much thinking that. And so whenever I get a chance, I'm like, I just got to go do cool stuff, even if I'm not
Mm.
feeling it. Like, and that's one thing I would say is I don't always feel like doing it, or like I'm not even in the mood. And it's like not just like, oh, I don't want to go on a run, but like the other day I had an opportunity to go do a sweat lodge, which is like a Native American like 3-4 hour crazy sauna session with like chanting. And I had no idea honestly what it was, but I was like, and I had all these other things coming up, and I was like, oh, I want to do that instead. But I already kind of said I would do this, but I didn't know anybody doing it. I had no connections. Like I didn't know anybody at the event. And I was like, I just didn't want to go. I was like, this is just going to be awkward. I don't want to
Mhm.
do it, but I bet it'll be a good experience. And so I ended up going just because I've proven to myself enough time to just do stuff, even if you don't feel like it, especially new experiences. And it was a really, really cool experience. And so a lot of times I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't have any drive to do it, but I know if I get out of my comfort zone and I push myself, I almost never, I can't think of a time where I'm like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that thing. Even if it's like, oh, I wouldn't do that again, but that was a cool experience. Now I have that in my life. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah,
get
that's
out of your
cool. That's a
comfort
good
zone.
good philosophy. I love that. Yeah, there's something about nature for sure.
Yeah, it's
I put
wild.
an outdoor shower in my last house, and I'm put one in this house as well. But dude, I showered outside probably 90% of the time. I don't know why. Like I just felt like my mind was so much more clear and open, and I had all these different thoughts. And anyhow,
Dude, I want to do
something
that.
about it,
I
dude.
know in Hawaii that makes more sense than in Utah, but I'm like, I need to do that because I've done that like once, and I thought it was the most awesome experience too. Like showering outside's a trip.
It is, dude. It's
I'm gonna
amazing.
freaking do that, dude.
It's amazing. It yeah, yeah, it's I don't know. Something about it. But same thing with like sauna, dude. That's why like I just got my sauna all set up at my house, and like I have this huge window on the front of it that overlooks the ocean. And dude, for me, I get like my best thoughts like in the sauna. I don't know, I start my day with it like before workout, and it just I don't know. I can think so clearly. I don't know
Mm.
why or what, or I don't know. It just I love it. So it's like, hey, how can I incorporate these things into my lifestyle and into my daily routines, because it ultimately makes me feel better and whatnot. So
Yeah,
all right, dude. You ready for some real estate questions?
let's do it. Let's talk real estate.
Okay, cool. First one for you. One thing every new investor should know that they don't know they need to know.
Something every new investor should know they don't know they need to know. Um, I so I've recently just I would say that you will learn more by taking action than by any other way. But I would add, you can take reversible actions though. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is So I just got this deal. I was putting this offer in on this like rehab project, which rehab projects are new to me. I've always avoided rehab projects. I'm like, no, I just do turnkey. Like that's a whole ball game. But lately I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get into it. I want to recycle some money, and that's the best way. So anyway, and it was a deal out in Arkansas. And the way they did their real estate purchase contract was just different than what I was used to, different than Kentucky and Oklahoma and Utah and New York. Like I've done a lot of different states and purchase contracts, but they were different. Like they didn't want to do the earnest money was different. They did this like other kind of deposit money, and they wouldn't, nobody does earnest money there. And it was just like, there was a lot of these little nuances. And the reason I bring that up is just because I was putting in an offer, I didn't even get the offer accepted. But going through of actually getting the agent, getting the deal, putting the offer in, I learned like all these different nuances about that market and how they structure their deals that I wouldn't have known by just listening to another podcast or listening to
Mm.
another book. And it was cool because it was actually a partner deal with a student that ended up finding it. So he was like going to get a piece of the pie just for finding it. And then I was having another partner fund the project, and I was going to put it all together. And it still might work out. We'll see what they say. We're like doing these counters back and forth. But actually taking the action, even reversible action, you'll learn more of these little nuances that are really hard to teach because they're so specific to that situation. So I
Mm.
always encourage people get a deal under contract, put in offers. Right now, my whole team, my whole pod that I work with, we're doing a March Madness style competition where there's points for different things they do. And I was like, you need to get
Ooh, I
like
love that.
deals under. I should send it to you. Yeah, it's like you have to get deals under contract. It's like you can back out of the contract. I don't care. You don't have to buy it, but you need to get something under contract because you'll learn a ton by doing that. And so it's kind of
Ooh,
fun.
yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. Especially reversible action like that.
Yeah. Cause then
That's
it's
a big
easy. It's
spin
like
to it.
put in an LOI, a
You
letter
got
of
nothing to
intent.
lose. Yep.
Just do that even. You know what I mean? I think they
Yep.
have to do 5 of those this month. They have to put in 5 LOIs. And then they have to get one deal under contract. I'm like, I don't care if you buy it or not, but you have to get under contract. Like you will learn more
Yes.
by doing than what I can just keep telling you because there's so many little nuances and it changes,
Yeah.
you know?
Well,
Like they're
dude.
changing like the whole deal with all the agents now, and commissions are all going to change. It's like people talk about that, and go put some offers in and you'll see how it actually affects you instead of listening to everybody talk on Instagram about, hey, what's it going to be like, what's going to happen. Like go put a couple offers in, you'll see.
Yeah.
Like it's that simple, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So good, dude. Yeah. Like speaking of James Clear and Atomic Habits, it almost reminds, that's one of the things in there that he talks about is, okay, you don't have a habit of going like and working out at the gym. Like, here's what I want you to do. Like, first, I just want you to wake up and put your gym clothes on. Don't go to the gym, just wake up and put your gym clothes on. Like next, I
Mm-hmm.
want you to like put your gym clothes on and then drive to the gym. Go home, just drive to the parking lot and then go home. Next, I want you to check in and then turn around and like leave. Right. And it's just like those are reversible actions, right? You're not committing to going to the gym. Like you're not
Mm-hmm.
taking up all this time. Like all you're doing is putting your shoes on. All you're doing is driving to the gym. All you're doing. And eventually, guess what? It's like, well, I've already come this far. I might as well just work out. And it comes easier to do the deal than not to do the deal. So I think there's
Yep.
so much power in that. How would that change for an experienced investor? What any advice that you would give them on what they need to know that they don't know they need to know?
So for an experienced one, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I would say you need to have a multi-step goal. Like you need to know there's multiple levels to this. Okay, stage 1, I want to hit, 10,000 cash flow so I can live on. Then stage 2, I want to start building assets that are going to appreciate really big. And then stage 3, I want to build like, kind of passion projects that I can share with different people, like whatever. And stage 4, then I want to hit this new cash flow goal of 25,000 a month, and just like have a multi-stage goal so you can see this big picture bird's eye view, and then be very honest with yourself about which step you're on. And this goes like we were talking about before, like, but where are you at right now? Are you an experience part of life or service part of life, or what's the priority right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then just laser focus, put on the blinders. Like if you're on step 2, that is what matters most, and just go super hard. Because so many experienced investors, especially when they start to know stuff, they're like, oh, now I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And it's like they forget what their priority is. Um, and be like, but that's important too. It's like, yeah, that's important for step three, but you're on step two. So like just focus on step two. And then once you
Mhm.
hit the barrier, you move into step three. Now you can pivot your focus. So have a multi-step goal, and be honest with yourself which step you're on, and then put the blinders and just sprint where you're at.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, and I think understanding when you do shift to that multi-step or that next level, to not be
Mm-hmm.
stuck in the previous level, because
For
things
sure.
things change. Your time is
Mm-hmm.
worth more. It's, it's just, it's different. So I love that. I still struggle
Yeah.
to this day with like good deals, which that's not a bad thing, right? Especially good real estate deals, but like I'll buy something used for 75% off, as opposed to like, and it'll cause me more problems,
Yeah.
as opposed to like booking flights and stuff too. Is just like, I mean, my assistant books my flights now, but it was like the hardest thing to get over. Like, oh,
But
well,
it's such
I'm
a
just
good
gonna,
deal.
yeah, it's an hour longer. Like, okay, it's a middle seat, but you save $500. Like, all right, let's do it. And then like you end up regretting it, right? Because like, oh, I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
the workspace, I didn't have the this, and it actually cost me more money than it made. Anyhow, so I think that's a good piece of it too, is recognizing that, okay, you're in a different phase now, and the things in the thought process and the belief system of your old level doesn't serve you anymore. Like, you need to adopt this new belief system and ways of acting. Okay,
Yeah.
dude. Next one. What do you think is holding most people back from either starting or scaling? Maybe it's a lot of the same stuff, but anything different that comes to mind. What's holding most people back?
I mean, there's so many specific situations. Like we said, there's a million ways to equal 100, right? But I would say in general, mindset, but not just like, oh, do you have confidence in yourself mindset, but like, but literally understanding that there are so many possible solutions. Like we said, there's so many ways to equal 100. Like people really, they talk to one lender and the lender says, oh no, you don't qualify. Dude, this is wild. Get this. I went and was, I write off way too much in taxes, so it's really hard to get loans right now. I'm like trying to like backstep and fix some things this year. But I met with this one lender and they pre-qualified me for like 200,000 or something. I'm like, okay, great, thanks. I go meet with another lender a few months later. I haven't redone my taxes. Nothing's different, you guys. Qualified for 660. I'm just like, what the? And the big reason is the other lender understood real estate investing and how to roll back a lot of the expenses, and they weren't counting the debt against me the same way the first one was. And I told them, I knew that was what was going on. I told them like, no, 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 like you can roll back these expenses. These debts are service. These shouldn't count against me. And like, no, no, we know, but they did not do it right. But this other
Mhm.
one, that's all they work with are investors, and they understood it
Mhm.
perfectly. And I was able to get 3 times the qualification of debt that I could with the first lender. And so my point with that example is just like when what hold people back is they think there's not as many options and there's possibilities. They go, oh, I can't get a loan. And so they stop. They go, and the loan's the only way to get a deal. So I'm done. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, so who cares if you can't get a loan from this lender? Go to a different lender or get a different type of loan. Or like, there's 1,000 different ways to do it. But people have such limited concept of the possibilities out there that they just shut down. And they don't, and then they don't have the confidence, and because you know they don't know that there's options. But once you've done enough and you've
Yeah.
seen that there's 1,000 options you've never thought of, then you're like, oh, I'll figure something out, and then you can keep going and take a lot more action.
Yeah. So good, dude. Yeah, this is a text I got this morning, from somebody with a property under contract, and they said appraisal came back $150,000 under,
Mm.
and they're like, which is wild to me because we got it at an $80,000 discount when we bought the property, and so like, what should we do? Right? Is kind of the question, more or less. And I think, and these people are their students and their, experience, and they're successful, and it's like they know how to get through things and not take no for an answer. But I think somebody else asking that question or being in that same scenario, like the first kind of response is like, oh dude, I don't have an extra $150,000 of cash that like I have to back out of the deal. Right. And so
Mhm.
my like my response to them, and I'm just shooting from the hip, but like how many ways can we come up with right off the bat on how to solve that problem? Like my first response was, okay, first thing, tell the seller what happened. Hey, this is what the property came back at. It's $150,000 less than what we have agreed on as a price. Like I don't have that in cash. Are you guys willing to cover that? If they say no, that doesn't mean the deal's done, right? That's the easiest way, because you might be overthinking
What do you
everything
mean
and
by
they're like,
cover that?
cover that as in lower the sales price,
Okay.
sell it for $150,000 less
Yeah.
because
Sell
apparently
it for
that's
what
what
it's
it's worth.
appraising for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah. Which
sense.
happens all the
Sure.
time, right? Especially if it's been on the market for a while and they're like, we've been under contract for 2 months now. All the docs are finalized with the loan. They're approved. We're supposed to close in 2 weeks, whatever, whatever. So a lot of times that's going through the seller's mind. I actually think that's maybe a good strategy, but also could rub people the wrong way. Is like just getting a property under contract and then like figuring it out. I know that's a lot of people's strategy of like getting an inspection done, and then you're like, hey, dude, these are all the things that are
Yeah.
wrong with this. Like, I'll still buy it, but I'm not paying the same price for it. And I think there's something psychologically about getting so far along in the process to where the seller is like, all right, we've already gone this far. I didn't want to come this far to come this far. Let's just close the deal. I'll take
Yeah.
that. Doesn't always work, but anyhow, not saying I encourage that or anything like that, but there's definitely something that works with that principle, if you do it the right way and do it ethically. But a lot of times I just say, yes, that makes sense. It's worth this much. It got appraised. Like, cool, easy, right? Okay, what happens if they say no? Okay, well, we'd still love to do the deal. We still love the house. Are you willing to sell or finance that 150,000
That's
bucks?
what I was thinking. I was like, cool, let's do a separate promissory note on the side. You sell or finance the difference because the bank's not
Yep.
going to, and I'm not going to come out of pocket. So if you
Yep.
really want that price, we can do it, but you got to give me a good term on a seller finance. Like
100%.
that was what I was
Next,
thinking.
what
Yeah.
if they say no to that? Okay. What if I meet you halfway? You know, you cover
Mm-hmm.
75K of that. Let's lower the sales price. I'll cover the other 75K. And maybe you get even a little bit tricky on how you do that. And you say, hey, let's actually sell it for, this much, but then you'll credit me back for rehab. And, there's only so much they can credit you back, but maybe they cover closing costs. They do all these things. And that's a way of coming up with less cash for you. Okay. Next option. Well, maybe they're willing to sell or finance the whole thing. If you didn't take that into consideration, you actually pay more for the property, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hard money loan, right? Maybe that's a route that you go down where you can actually put 10% down on the entire purchase price plus the rehab, because they're going to go and rehab this. There's a handful of units. I think there's 4 units total on this property. It's zoned residential commercial, is the zoning on it. And so you're going to rehab it anyways. Maybe you go get a hard money loan, you pay a little bit more in interest and, upfront fees, and then you do the burst strategy, you fix it up, you're out the same amount of cash, and now you actually able to pull more money out of this thing long term, and you're in a better situation anyways, right? So maybe you
Yeah.
explore that. The other thing that you explore, which is probably one of the first things that you do, um, aside from asking them if they'll just take a lower price, is you go back to your lender and you're like, hey, this isn't gonna work. Like, why did this appraise for this amount? We're confident it looks for this. Here's some comps that show this in the area, and
Challenge
maybe
the
they can have it.
appraisal.
Yeah, maybe they can have a different appraiser go back, or maybe they can adjust it. Like, that happens all the time where
Sure.
appraisers can just, oh, I didn't realize that. Let me adjust this appraisal based on this new information, right? So that could easily happen. The other piece, this is the last thing I just say on it, and this was in my, just like 2-minute voice memo back, saying all these different random things just to get like your mind going on it, was maybe when he appraised it, right? There's a difference in a commercial appraisal versus like a residential appraisal. A lot of times
Mm-hmm.
residential, they're appraising it based on the comps as opposed to what homes are selling for. they're not taking into account what it's renting for. So the fact that this is zoned residential commercial and there's 4 units, like maybe you can look at it, and some of those units might not be, like full on legal units, or I don't want to say legal, but maybe it's a triplex, but one of them's classified as, a studio or whatever, right? I don't know if they have
Right.
separate tax IDs and all that, but maybe you get them to appraise it based on an investment property and a commercial property. So now, how do they value the property? They don't look at the
Cap rate.
comps.
Yeah.
They look at the rent roll, right? They look at, hey, what can this rent for? And that's why you see so many people that, buy these commercial properties or, big apartment complexes. And then they add a few little things here to boost the rent. And once they stabilize the rent, you raise rent, $100 in 50 units. What does that mean? Your rent just went up per month. What is that? $5,000?
Yeah.
Right. So like little things like that, where now the property's worth X amount more, which could be significant. Raising $100 a unit or $200 a unit, it can make the property worth like millions more depending on how large it is. So just understanding that and how it was appraised. And so just different, like just right there, I don't even know how many I stopped counting, but that's like 7 or 8 different strategies, as opposed to being like,
Gotta
bummer.
cancel the deal. Oh, well. Yeah. It's like, and that's the thing. There's so many opportunities. There's so many possibilities. Understanding how many possibilities. I thought another one, I was like, if the deal's good enough, bring in a partner for the down payment, give him some of the pie. And if the deal's actually sick and it's worth that much, which you put that offer in at that much, so I assume you think it's worth that much, there's another option. We could probably do 20 more if we kept thinking about it, And so it's like, I think that's the biggest thing that holds people back, is not understanding the amount of legitimate possibilities to get something to work.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah. 100%, dude. Maybe you just get a new lender and then it's problem solved, right? You go through the same thing. Like, yeah, there's so many, but I think that's like a principle for real estate. That's a principle for life. Like you don't take no for an answer. Like when you want something bad enough, you figure out a way to make it happen and go get it done. And it doesn't matter kind of what stands in your way, right? It's like my goals are non-negotiable. It's like Jesse Itzler, like you don't have a seat at the table, you go make a seat at the table. That's the separator. That's the difference. And at the end of the day, you either want it bad enough or you don't. What's willing to get in the way and not get in the way. And speaking of Casey, one of the things that he shared, I don't think it was his definition, but he shared the definition of entrepreneurship. Do you remember that?
I don't remember what it was, but I remember him saying it. I was like, oh, I never thought of it quite like that.
Yeah, I was looking through my notes the other day on it, without going back and reading it. It was essentially, the entrepreneurship is the gap between what you want and the resources currently available to you. I think you say the same thing for like successful real estate investors are defined by making up the gap between what they want and the resources currently available to them. And so many times we just focus on, these are the resources currently available to me. So I have to operate from this bubble and from this sphere. If there's something outside of that, I cannot do it because it doesn't work. And even if I want this thing and this is what I really want, but it's outside my current resources, I can't go and do that. Therefore, I'm not even going to think that big. I'm not even going to dream that big. I'm not even going to set goals that big because it's outside of this sphere. So I think like that's what it comes down to, is like, okay, how creative are you going to get? How much tenacity are you going to have to go and chase what's outside of your current skill set or resources or mindset sometimes?
Love it, man. Well, this is exciting. I know you have to get going, or I'd keep chatting for another hour or two about this, but I appreciate, man. Any last thoughts you want to share with everybody before we take off?
No, dude. I think like we've covered some good stuff here. Just in general, it's just good to jam. I just like shout out to you guys that are listening to this podcast consistently. It's definitely growing, and it shows, like the ones that are just willing to plug into it, and not even just this podcast, but just I think so many times you can learn by osmosis. And that might sound like a bad thing because you're just passively learning. But I also think that that's a really good strategy of just being consistent, plugging in the stuff that's coming into your mind consistently day in, day out. You're learning about these real deals that people are doing. You're learning about these, the stories that these guests are having, the processes that they're going through. That stuff adds up. And as always, like if you want help, if you want some extra accountability, you want some extra help taking action, that's what we're about at Real Estate Investing School. We're sharing all that stuff, but we're doing it in like an organized way. And then we're just holding you accountable. And I think that's the next level. You're talking about these different levels. Like if you're at a spot where you're getting a lot of information and you're not taking as much action as you would like to be, guess what? It might be time to get to this next level, which involves you hiring somebody that's going to actually keep you accountable and hold you there. So you can always book a call with us and we'll explore what that looks like.
Yeah, man. And it's been fun, because, the school's been around long enough. First, I had all these new students. We're just teaching them the basics. And now I've got students who've been here a while. And now it's just fun because we're a lot of times we're just doing deals together. Like they're bringing me deals and we're doing partner deals and we're bringing in outside guys that, and just like putting stuff together. And even if it doesn't always come out, as a finished product, we learn so much by doing it that way. And that's been a super fun thing lately with me, with some of the students, is just putting deals under contract together and pushing things through together and piecing it together with 3 or 4 different people if we need to. But it's just been like super fun at, after we kind of taught the basics. So it's been fun.
Yeah. It's blown my mind how many, because everyone's at different levels, right? Like someone's strength might be they have a ton of money. They don't have as much time. Like we have a lot of students like that. Somebody else's might be the exact opposite. They have time, but they don't have as much money. And so there's been a lot of just different partnering and different things going like around like that, which I love. It's so cool. You're just kind of using your strength to maximize somebody else's weakness and vice versa. And even like the win you shared the other day on our coaches call of like one of your students, I thought was so rad because it's like, you just went through their journey of how, they did this one deal and then they did this deal and then it compounded into this. And then they, took money out and rolled it into this. And now they're buying this apartment complex. And I was like, dude, that's cool. Like that's the fun, exciting stuff. And that's what happens, over the long term, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool seeing the culmination of effects, year after year now. Cause that's where the real impact comes in. So.
Cool, dude. Well, hey, I appreciate you jamming, man. This has been fun for me. I've learned a lot from you. I look up to you and love having you as the host of this show. You're so good, dude.
Dude, it's a blast. I need to get out there to Maui sooner than later and come see the new place.
Come on out.
All right. Well, sweet, man. Well, without further ado, this is Joe Jensen signing off for the Real Estate Investing School podcast, reminding you to guard your attention and use it wisely.